Humboldt, Tennessee is one of the settings for a series of mysteries featuring the main character, Detective Carson Reno. It's also the hometown area of the author, Gerald W. Darnell. Humboldt, Tennessee, full of colorful characters and locations, and next door to Shelby County, home of Memphis, a city known for its music, its legend Elvis Presley, the Peabody Hotel with the famous ducks that visit the lobby fountain each day, and where Detective Carson Reno has his office, something that Carson and author Gerald W. Darnell actually have in common. Gerald, tell us a little bit about your growing up days in the Humboldt and Memphis area and the influence that it's had on your writing.
Well, growing up in a small town has its obvious advantages and disadvantages, but I'd say more an advantage to me was getting to know the people and the characters, and which I do reflect somewhat in the book. Although fictional, there's a lot of life in those that I portray. I lived in Memphis on several occasions. First occasion being back in the early 70s, and I actually worked in the Peabody Hotel. I worked for the company that owned the Peabody at that time, and that was ITT. So a lot of the things that you hear Carson do, and a lot of the descriptions that you hear from Carson regarding the Peabody and the surrounding areas are actually things that I had experienced from having my office there, and things in the lobby and with the ducks and with the many characters around Memphis and the Peabody.
So when did you first become interested in writing? I mean, you have a series of mysteries here with Carson Reno. Was this the beginning for you, or did you have some other experiences that got you started?
I actually wrote several articles back in the late 60s and 70s for Outdoor Life. They were hunting adventures, hunting stories, real life, true stuff. And then in a corporate world, I didn't really have time to do that, but I did collect notes and keep information from some of the humorous parts of my travel and some parts of the travel that were not so humorous. But I collected those for probably 15 years and began to write a chapter here and a chapter there. And all of a sudden one day I just decided if I'm going to do it, sit down and put it together. And that's where I came up with the Please Don't Wake Me Until It's Time to Go, which is just really a series of stories and adventures from my life, beginning in the early days in Humboldt up until the present time, or at least present time back a few years ago. But the Carson Reno came from a little different aspect. I had always had the idea of taking a character and creating a mystery in a little small town, and which you don't see a lot of, and then putting a setting in a time period that I was familiar with, being the early 60s. And from that, Carson was born, and I solicited a lot of my friends who portray characters in the book for ideas and inspiration, and it just took off from there.
Now, did you have some favorite books growing up or authors that sort of influenced your style of doing a mystery that's in this setting?
Well, yeah, I think we all did. I mean, even as a little boy, I would write little Western stories for my grandmother and, print them out with big print. But I was always a Perry Mason fan. I was always a mystery fan. And but the opportunity that I had in the corporate world, it put me on an airplane and traveling a lot. And I read a lot of books. Rich, I can't even tell you how many hundreds of books I did read. Most of them in the attic now, and we laugh when we pull one down because they all have my boarding passes in them. I used for bookmarkers all over the years. And I really enjoyed reading a book before I saw the movie. And in fact, if I saw the movie first, I probably would not read the book.
So you graduated or attended the University of Tennessee. Did you study writing there at all, or anything about drama or creative works?
No, I didn't. I was a marketing and management major, and I really did very little work other than school work and what I had to do from a writing standpoint while I was in college. I didn't really do any there.
It's 9 in the series of the Carson Reno Mysteries now, is that right?
There are 9 published, yes, and I have another one coming out this summer.
So we had the chance to produce the audiobook for you for Killer Among Us. Give us a little thumbnail sketch of what the story's about and how you came about to write that particular story.
The idea of a witness protection program and being located to a small town like Humboldt, and then crossing back over the line and going back into the world of the mafia world as we know it, and getting himself in back in trouble there. But as with all the books, I use locations that are real and stories that that are not, but they do fit with the with the time and the characters.
The style of the mystery reminded me a lot of the old radio shows back in the 1940s and 50s. Did you listen to those growing up?
And I still do, Rich. I have a satellite radio in my vehicle, and when I'm traveling, I listen to the old time radios and the old time mysteries. And in fact, I used to record a lot of them when the old CBS Mystery Theater was on. I would listen to those, and I guess that's where a lot of my ideas came from. I really don't know.
As you were thinking through the process of this story, had you had any conversations or experience with any law enforcement people on the subject of witness protection, or can you tell us?
Well, yeah, I can. Some of the characters in the Carson Reno Mysteries are no longer with us. The sheriff that we portray is Leroy Epsy. He's no longer with us, but I do have a friend that is a retired Tennessee Highway patrolman. His name is Chip Miller, and in the books you will see him as Chip Falstaff, and he gets a kick out of that. But yes, I did talk to Chip a lot about that, and kind of and as I think it says somewhere in the book, this probably happens more than we really know about.
Now, the new book that's coming out, is there a title for that yet?
Yes, it's called The Fingerprint Murders.
Is there any kind of continuation from previous books, or is it a completely separate story?
I try to keep them all separate, Rich, so the reader can pick up any book and pick up on the storyline. The only connections are obviously the characters, or some of the core characters that continue through, and as they do, of course, grow and develop. But no, there's no continuation. The only partial continuation is there is a character from an earlier book that comes back and appears here, but now you don't really need to know that in order to enjoy the book.
One thing I was impressed with is, I think you stated this on your website somewhere or in your bio, that you tried to keep these in a format, I guess, that most people could read, as PG rated, I guess would be the word to use. Was this a conscious effort on your part to not get to go cross too many lines with language and visualization of events?
Yes, and I have an editor that keeps me in line doing that. She is very adamant that that the language is clean. There's no overt sex or anything like it. It's just insinuations of that type of thing. So yes, it is a conscious effort to do that, and I've been successful in doing that. At least I think so.
I found it extremely refreshing that you could tell a story that had mystery, intrigue, murder, crime, mafia. It didn't have to be The Godfather. It could easily be entertaining without crossing over those lines that says, okay, this is not for all audiences.
Yeah, and it's difficult when you're dealing with a mafia element and trying to keep the language on a PG basis. But so far I've been able to do that, and And I do plan on continuing that as Carson Reno the series continues. I don't want to revert back, and my readers have appreciated that as well.
As your friends and some of the hometown folks from that area have read your books or listened to your books, have they identified with your stories?
Oh yeah, and they're continually trying to find themselves in one of my novels and see if I have picked their character out and gave them another name and used it, which I have on a number of occasions. And I also in the book that's coming out, I actually had a request from one of my friends in Humboldt to put her late husband in the book, which I did, and with her permission, and actually used his name. And she's so excited that she can't wait for me to deliver her a handful of them. But yes, they have reflected with that, and in addition to the Peabody, the other general location in all the books is a restaurant called Chiefs, which actually the building up until 6 months ago or 3 months ago was really there. They actually bulldozed it down a few months ago. But with the time period and the age and the people, they remember that, and as well as I do, of course, and with the stories that Carson gets involved in.
Besides being in the genre of a murder mystery, what would you call the style of your writing in this book?
I write in what I call fiction for fun, and I want it to be fun, but I want it to, obviously to have a story and to be intriguing. There is some reflection there, and I think that you and I discussed how the character Carson Reno should be portrayed, and we reflected on some of the older movies, the Philip Marlowes, the Sam Spades, and that, and I like to think he has some of that element in him, being a little bit on the tough side when he needs to be, a hard drinker, and but he has a lot of humor, and he has a sense of humor and tries to put humor in what he does.
Living in that area of the country as long as you did you ever happen to run into the king of rock and roll?
He did stop in Humboldt once or twice, I understand, and I've seen some photos of him being there, and then when I lived in Memphis, he was certainly alive and was there on what's now Elvis Presley Boulevard. So I was close and traveled by his home on various occasions, but I never really did meet him, no.
We talk about him in the book, but what about B.B. King? He's still around?
Yes, and he's still with us, and his club is still there on Beale Street. I've been there many times.
Do you have an affinity for the blues? Is that one of your favorite kind of music?
Blues and jazz, and which obviously translates over to the kind of music Carson likes too, so yes.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love the theme music to the book. It's got a definite signature to it that sounds like Carson Reno. Well, I wish you the best on your new book coming out, and we look forward. Maybe we'll have an opportunity to talk again when that happens.
I hope so. Thank you, Rich. I appreciate the opportunity, and certainly I invite everyone to, enjoy Killer Among Us. I think it's a good book. My readers think it's a good book, and I certainly had fun writing it, and I know you had fun producing it.
We've been talking with Gerald W. Darnell, author of Killer Among Us, one in the series of mysteries featuring Detective Carson Reno, written in a classic style of the 1960s and for all audiences, from teens to adults. Killer Among Us is available as an audiobook at audible.com, Amazon, and iTunes. Produced by Rich Germaine with audiobookproducers.com, which produces and distributes audiobooks for independent authors and publishers. Learn more at audiobookproducers.com. You can learn more about the Carson Reno books at Carson Reno Mystery Series.com.